Just what in the world has happened to Kansas State? This was a team that people had picked to go to the college football playoff, win the Big 12, be that conference's representative, and try to do some damage on the pathway to a national championship. And instead, they're 1-2. And I think there's two distinctly different ways to view Kansas State as the 2025 college football season rolls on. I think the first way is to look at them with unbridled optimism that each of their 3 games thus far have been settled by a field goal. And unfortunately for them, they're 1-2. 24-21 twice, one to Iowa State, one to Army, and a 38-35 win over FCS North Dakota. And there are all sorts of arguments about all sorts of things that maybe starting the season off in Dublin, Ireland threw them off. Maybe the injury to Dylan Edwards threw them off. Sometimes teams just don't get out of the blocks all that great. Whatever the case may be, you can make whatever argument you would like to say, hey, the path to the Big 12 championship is still really bright and rosy for Kansas State. And that is unbridled optimism, in my opinion. I don't think I would go that far. The other way to view Kansas State is to question if they are the 2025 version of last year's Florida State team. And in recent college football memory, I don't know that there is anything less I would like to be compared to than 2024 Florida State. Top 10 ranking to start the season. Go to Dublin to start the year, and the wheels absolutely fall off. They go 2-10, and people question just what in the hell are we doing? There has not really been in recent memory as big of a collapse, disaster, any other word you'd like to use, from preseason expectations to ultimately here's what was put on the table than 2024 Florida State. The problem for Kansas State fans in that line of thinking is that the similarities are striking. Florida State in 2024 started the season in Dublin, Ireland, loses a game to a conference opponent, 24-21. 2025, Kansas State starts the season in Dublin, Ireland, loses to a conference opponent, 24-21. Florida State gets 2 wins on the season, one of them against an FCS opponent. Right now, Kansas State's 1-2 with a win against an FCS opponent. Florida State loses a game to a team from the American Athletic Conference 2 weeks after they get back from Ireland. Kansas State in 2025 loses a game against a team from the American Athletic Conference 2 weeks after coming back from Ireland. And that is both one-score games. Florida State lost 20-12. Kansas State lost to Army 24-21. The first conference game on American soil happens against what you could argue for Florida State last year against the worst team in a conference, and the California Golden Bears. They get a win. The first Big 12 game on American soil for Kansas State after coming back from Ireland is against what you could argue the worst team in the Big 12 at Arizona on Friday night. The similarities to start that season shouldn't instill a lot of confidence in Kansas State that, hey, we're not going to be 2024 Florida State because we're going to turn this thing around. You know what happened to the Seminoles last year. They were the laughingstock. And I don't think that's necessarily fair because there were a lot of people who said, hey, this Florida State team is going to make the college football playoff. This is a top 10 team. DJ Uiagalelei is going to lead them to new heights. I don't know that that's Florida State's problem as much as it is the people who wildly inaccurately predicted that Florida State was going to make the college football playoff and that DJ Uiagalelei was going to be the quarterback that he had never been in college football. Kansas State didn't have that level of expectations. They didn't start in the year as a top 10 team. They started the year as a top 20 team, and they were a trendy pick to make the college football playoff because the Big 12 was quasi up for grabs. Nobody had it on lockdown. There wasn't that complete consensus that, like, hey, Clemson's going to win the ACC. That didn't exist for the Big 12. There were all sorts of names being rattled off for teams that were going to compete and vie for that college football playoff berth. There were people that would tell you that Utah was going to be a college football playoff team and that Devin Dampier was going to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, I like Devin Dampier, but I'm not going to go that far. I told you that I thought Iowa State was going to win the Big 12 and be the Big 12 representative in the college football playoff. Kansas State was one of those teams. TCU, after how they played against North Carolina, I don't know how you don't think that they could have that level of season this year. Arizona State was another trendy pick. And we might talk about the Sun Devils tomorrow because how bad of a loss to Mississippi State was that? But all of that to say that Kansas State was kind of viewed as the favorite. And right now they sit at 1-2. And I understand the argument from K-State fans is going to be, hey, it's really hard to play Army. Like, they do things that nobody else does. And virtually any other year, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. It's hard to make that case the week after Army loses to Tarleton State, an FCS school that's been an FCS school for like 3 years. Army lost to a team that's almost Division II. And then comes in to K-State and wins. So it's hard to just punt on that from where I sit. And that's why I have struggled with the unbridled optimism of K-State's just slow getting out of the chutes and everything's going to be hunky-dory. Now, they have the opportunity to right the ship because they play at Arizona on a Friday night. Wildcats, not especially good. Okay. Are they 2-0? Yes. Piss out of Hawaii and the piss out of Weber State. Not exactly murderer's row. But they play on a Friday night on the road at Arizona. You get a win. You're 2-2. You get that extra day to rest, prep, etc. But you don't. You get a bye week after you play at Arizona. So Kansas State can really find out who they are after 4 games on Friday night and have extra time to then get ready for a stretch that maybe even a couple of weeks ago didn't look all that difficult, but they then play UCF at Baylor and TCU. Those are 3 pretty good football teams. And when you've struggled with the likes of Iowa State and Army, if you lose here to Arizona on the road, are you looking at a 1-5 record to start the season? Probably, which is completely off the board for what was expected of Kansas State. But I think I'm somewhere in the middle here of unbridled optimism and holy hell, the curse of losing in Dublin, Ireland is real. Because through 3 games, the point differential of those 3 games is 9 points. They've played in 3 one-score games, decided each of them by field goals. I've mentioned before, winning is hard. It's really hard to win. It's really hard to win on the road. It's really hard to win conference games. Throw in, it's really hard to win against Army, Navy, and Air Force just from strictly what they do. It's also hard to learn how to win, learn how to close out a game, learn what it takes to be a winner. And Chris Kleiman, the head coach at Kansas State, throughout his history has been a winner. And if the best predictor of the future is the past, then as I sit here today, I find it difficult to believe that Kansas State doesn't find a way to turn this around. I'm not predicting a 10-2 record and they still find their way into the college football playoff, because that seems unlikely still with UCF at Baylor, TCU on the schedule, let alone they go to Utah, they play Texas Tech, play Colorado, etc. I think that I always thought was kind of a pipe dream of making the college football playoff is gone for Kansas State. And that's something that you have to weigh of. If you talk yourself into, we're going to make the college football playoff, we're going to make the college football playoff, we're going to win the Big 12, and then you lose your first game, it's insanely demoralizing, but you have to find a way to bounce back from that. And I will give K-State the benefit of the doubt that they will find a way to bounce back from that. But I don't feel super confident in that pick. I think what happens in Tucson on Friday night is a big tell of whether or not 2025 K-State is 2024 Florida State, or whether or not they figure this out and become remotely close to the team that people expected them to be coming into the season. But right now, they've got a big rally ahead of them if they still want to even be in that title contention. And it feels increasingly unlikely the more that the season went on, because after they beat North Dakota, they were still receiving votes in the top 25. And it makes you question, like, okay, do people watch the people who vote in these polls? Do they watch the games because they lose in Dublin to Iowa State? They have to rally and beat North Dakota at home, and you're still viewed as one of the top 25 teams in the country, to then flat out lay an egg against Army and get beat in your home stadium. There are a lot of people still holding on to that hope and dream that K-State is something that I don't think they are, but they can still turn this thing around and be an above average Big 12 team. And I think you'll learn a lot about what Kansas State's future for the rest of the season looks like on Friday night in Tucson. Want to know your thoughts? You punting on Kansas State, or you think there's still hope that they could be one of the 12? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.